Arguing for the motion, John Yu.
Well, I'd like to thank the Rosencrantz Foundation and Intelligence Squared for giving me the opportunity to escape the People's Republic of Berkeley and to visit a more conservative city like New York. I understand that many of you, according to the Washington Post, are here on dates. I think this is a wonderful idea. It's really remarkable to me because the last date I had was in the first Reagan administration. I do have to say, though, I find it surprising that many people would think that the voice and appearance of Bob Barr would be an aphrodisiac. First, let me directly engage with Jeff's point. If there are things that the government can do to increase security without reducing privacy, we should have already done them. I think at some point, though, and I think we're at that point now, you reach a trade-off. It's not unusual to security policy. Every government decision involves a trade-off. When we decide to reduce greenhouse gases by having higher mile per gallons requirements for cars, we know a certain higher number of people will die on the highways because the cars will be lighter. Government decisions always involve trade-offs, and it is possible to have trade-offs that go the wrong way. We have had periods where civil liberties were greater than they are today, and we have suffered as a result. So, for example, the wall that many of you may have heard about, which prohibited the FBI and the CIA from pooling their information about terrorist networks, is the one thing that the 9/11 Commission found that directly led to the 9/11 attacks. Because we knew the names of two of the 9/11 hijackers inside the country, the agents who worked for the intelligence bureaus were unable to communicate that information to FBI agents inside the country who could have tried to locate them because of rules that were set up to protect civil liberties. Similarly, when we have tried to put Al-Qaeda members on trial before 9/11, and Mr. McCarthy was one of the prosecutors who did that, again, for civil liberties reasons, we turned over massive amounts of information to the defense teams. One of those was a list of all the co-conspirators of one of the Al-Qaeda suspects. If you think about it, that was a list of every single person at the time we thought was a member of Al-Qaeda. That list was found in Africa after the bombings in Yemen when our agents went out to try to find out who was responsible. I'm not saying that we should go all the way over security or all the way for civil liberties, but there is a balance and there's a trade-off. And having more civil liberties can have a cost of security, just as increasing security can have a reduction in civil liberties. Also, let me admit that in past wars, the government has reduced civil liberties, but I would say if you place it in historical perspective, those reductions of civil liberties are far greater than anything we're experiencing today. In 1798, the first war we fought as a country, it was made a crime to criticize the government during the war. In the Civil War, President Lincoln, on his own authority, detained thousands of American citizens in military detention without any recourse to civilian court and had many of them tried by military judges. In World War I, it was made a crime and people were prosecuted for criticizing the war effort, for arguing that people should not obey the draft. In World War II, President Roosevelt detained over 120,000 loyal American citizens. He initiated military courts, some of which were used to try American citizens. He ordered the warrantless wiretapping, not just of communications going in and out of the country, but every communication inside the United States, against a clear statute and Supreme Court precedent at the time, over a year and a half before Pearl Harbor. I think if you compare those measures that have been taken in wartime in American history in the past, the reductions in civil liberties we have today are nowhere near as large a level of magnitude. Take, for example, the political system. We have had one presidential election during this post-9/11 period. We have had several congressional elections. Political control of Congress just switched in the last election. We have had outpourings of new political speech through new methods and means. For example, people I wish never existed, bloggers. This did not exist before 9/11. Are we really in such a serious civil liberties crisis if Bloggers are able to use this new medium to say, I think, quite incredible things. Take the detention policy that I'm sure the other side is going to talk about. These are always slippery slope arguments. How many American citizens have actually been detained since 9/11 in military detention? It's not the thousands or hundreds of thousands from previous wars. By my count, it's 2. How many citizens of other countries in the United States, permanent resident aliens, have been detained as part of the post-9/11 program? Again, it's not thousands, it's not 100,000s. I think, again, that number is 2. Take the NSA surveillance program that we've all heard about. Again, this is a program that every president in war has used, sometimes without judicial supervision, often without congressional authorization, often without the knowledge of anybody, in order to gain information on pending attacks. So when you try to take into account these factors, the gains of security, which I think we've had, and loss of civil liberties, how should you think about this problem? Let me just close by making just a few points. First, have the expansions in government power been worth it? I would say yes. Look at the results. There have been no attacks since 9/11. And this is not because of luck. I think as even the 9/11 Commission report, the Silverman-Robb report have said, as the administration and members of Congress have said, these expanded surveillance powers have resulted in the capture of al-Qaeda members inside the United States and the prevention of plots. Since 9/11, the United States has succeeded in capturing or killing 2/3 of al-Qaeda's leadership at the time of 9/11. Again, that's not just through luck. Second point, are civil liberties being permanently reduced? I think many thoughtful people say, yes, there's a trade-off, but I would be worried if we reduce civil liberties in wartime in a way that once the war is over, civil liberties are permanently reduced. There's no way for me to tell you what's going to happen once this war is over, but if you look at past American history, wartime has not produced a significant permanent reduction in civil liberties. Actually, if you look at the historical record, after war, we usually as a society experience our greatest growth in civil liberties. The Civil War saw the passage of the Reconstruction Amendments and the Emancipation Proclamation. World War II was followed by the War on Court. The last point, complacency, I think, is the real enemy. Even having this debate is a sign of the confidence we have that our system is working. But we should be aware that we're fighting a different kind of enemy, a non-nation state that conceals its activities as normal civilian communications, as normal civilian travel. The hard thing is, how as a society do we fight a war against an enemy who does not follow any of the rules of war and tries to disguise itself as one of us? I'll close by saying I think so far we have made a successful balance between civil liberties and security. We have reduced attacks and threats on the country. I think those gains have been worth it. And the question is, I think, for all of us today, is whether we would feel comfortable reducing the amount of government powers and by doing so, give up some of the security we've bought at such a, I think, dear price since 9/11.
John Yoo, thank you very much.